This vegetable has 10 times more calcium than the classic potato, was cultivated by Native Americans for thousands of years, and saved the Pilgrims from the brink of starvation. Then within decades, those same colonists began displacing native peoples from their land, and with them, the knowledge of this survival crop. By the 1800s, it had vanished from American tables and was replaced by the industrial potato. This is the untold story of Apios americana, the American groundnut, a plant that was once a king of the forest and is now a ghost in the landscape. It's hard to grasp the profound importance of this plant without realizing that the landscape used to be a managed mosaic of abundance, rather than the sterile monocultures we see today. For thousands of years, the American groundnut wasn't some wild curiosity. It was a foundational staple. If you look back through the archaeological record, you'll find that for nearly 4 millennia, nations like the Iroquois, the Cherokee, the Dakota, and the Lenape integrated this twining vine into the very fabric of their cultures. The connection was so deep that the potato tribe of the Iroquois Confederacy actually used an illustration of the groundnut's unique, bead-like tubers as their sacred clan emblem. This wasn't just a food they happened to find, it was a food they lived with. They understood its maniliform root system, which is just a fancy way of saying it looks like a natural rosary of fleshy, pear-shaped tubers strung along a cord-like rhizome. These beads of life allowed the plant to spread horizontally through the soil, establishing these massive, expansive colonies that acted like a living insurance policy against famine. And it was a master of the environment. The groundnut thrives in acidic, waterlogged soils that would rot a modern potato in a matter of days. Because it's a perennial, it didn't need to be replanted every year. It was just there, waiting beneath the frost whenever it was needed. You can almost see the Menominee people building their elaborate scaffolds of cedar bark to dry these tubers for the winter, or boiling them down in maple syrup to create this incredibly nutrient-dense preserve that could sustain a traveler for weeks. The Chippewa and Meskwaki treated it like a culinary Swiss Army knife. They'd peel them, parboil them, and grind them into a seasoning and thickening agent that found its way into almost every meal. It was a currency of trade and a companion on migrations, which is why you still find it growing near ancient campsites today. It's like a living archaeological marker of where people once gathered. But then, the Europeans arrived. And that's where the story takes a tragic turn. History books usually gloss over how brutal those early settlements really were, but the record is pretty clear. Without Apios americana, the American experiment might have ended in the 17th century. Back in the 1580s, the settlers of the lost colony of Roanoke were so impressed by this potato bean that they actually sent samples back to Queen Elizabeth I as the most promising crop of the New World. Decades later, Captain John Smith of Jamestown recorded how the Powhatan people shared this survival food during those desperate summer months. But the most dramatic moment was in the Plymouth colony. By 1623, the Pilgrims had run out of corn and were facing certain starvation. They survived by digging groundnuts out of the frozen soil, a literal crash course in survival taught to them by the Wampanoag. It's a bit of a reality check for our modern myths, because the first Thanksgiving wasn't a feast of refined European grains. It was a meal of wild game and the humble roasted groundnut. It was the bridge between two worlds, a gift of the earth that the colonists would eventually choose to forget. As the world shifted toward industrialization, this great displacement happened. The American groundnut was pushed aside by the common potato, Solanum tuberosum. But you have to realize that this wasn't about nutrition or flavor. It was about the cold logic of the emerging industrial food system. The common potato is an annual crop. It produces a massive yield in just 90 days, which makes it perfect for the fast-paced, high-turnover requirements of commercial farming. In contrast, the groundnut is a bit of a slow-growing rebel. It's a perennial that often takes 2 to 3 years to produce tubers of a marketable size. Plus, it's a twining vine that can reach 20 feet in length, so it needs expensive trellises to reach its full potential, whereas the potato just sits there in a self-supporting, easy-to-manage bush. But the real deal-breaker was the way it grows. Those beautiful bead-like tubers, spread out along long, fragile rhizomes, were a total nightmare for 19th century mechanical harvesters. You couldn't just dig up a central cluster like you could with a potato. You had to carefully unearth a sprawling underground network. And in a world that began to value harvest ease and immediate profit over long-term nutrition and soil health, the groundnut was labeled a weed. It was too slow for capitalism, too difficult for the machine, and too independent to be easily turned into a commodity. They even sent it to Ireland during the Great Famine as a blight-resistant alternative. but the starving population couldn't wait 3 years for a harvest. The very traits that made it a resilient survival crop made it an industrial failure. However, if you look at the science today, it's becoming clear that in our rush for convenience, we abandoned a nutritional powerhouse that puts modern superfoods to shame. While everyone is talking about kale and spinach, researchers have found that Apios americana is a total biological outlier. A standard potato is mostly water and starch. It only has about 2 to 4% protein. But the American groundnut is a concentrated engine of nutrition, sitting at 11 to 17% protein. Some studies have even found seeds with 30% protein, which puts this root crop on the same level as soy and peas. A single portion of these tubers can provide the full recommended daily allowance for nearly every essential amino acid. It is, quite literally, meat that grows in the mud, packed with iron, calcium, and magnesium at levels that make grocery store produce look nutrient deficient. But the most impossible part of its biology is its relationship with the air. Deep within the roots of this plant lives a symbiotic partner, a strain of soil bacteria called Bradyrhizobium. Together, they perform this incredible feat of alchemy, pulling nitrogen gas from the air and converting it into ammonia to feed the plant. This means the groundnut actually creates its own fertilizer. In our modern agricultural system, we spend billions on synthetic nitrogen fertilizers that poison our waterways and deplete our soil. Yet the groundnut stands there as a perfect model of self-sufficiency. It doesn't just grow in the soil, it heals it. It's what's known as a dynamic accumulator, reaching deep into the earth to pull up minerals that other plants can't reach, and then depositing them back into the topsoil through its fallen leaves. This discovery actually led to a quiet revolution at Louisiana State University back in the 80s. A team of scientists spent a decade trying to do what nature had already perfected, domesticating the groundnut for the modern world. They collected over 200 wild strains from across the country, looking for elite versions that could produce high yields in a single season, with tubers clustered closer together for easier harvesting. They actually proved that the groundnut could be a viable commercial crop, a high-protein alternative to the potato that required fewer chemicals and less water. But, as is so often the case, when the program's funding dried up and the researchers retired, the domesticated groundnut was nearly lost again. Today, the legacy of that work is being guarded at Iowa State University, where scientists are using advanced genomic sequencing to identify the markers of this plant's resilience, just waiting for the moment the world is ready to embrace it. When you look at it closely, the groundnut is a direct threat to the status quo. The global agricultural complex relies on this cycle of buying and selling annual seeds that require a constant infusion of expensive chemicals. You can't easily control a food source that fixes its own nitrogen and thrives in marginal lands where industrial crops would just wither away. The $40 billion herbicide market depends on us seeing plants like the groundnut as a weed to be killed off, rather than a nutrient-rich resource to be harvested. Even the pharmaceutical industry has a stake in this, because they profit from a population that's deficient in the very minerals and isoflavones that the groundnut provides for free. Recent research shows these tubers are rich in genistein, which is this powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory compound currently being studied for its ability to fight cancer and hypertension. The groundnut is a natural pharmacy that grows for free, and in a system built on scarcity, that's a problem. But as we face things like climate change and soil degradation, the groundnut is shifting from a historical curiosity into a vital solution. It's a climate-smart crop that is virtually unkillable. It can survive Zone 3 winters. We're talking 30 degrees below zero, and yet it flourishes in the humid heat of Florida. It thrives in the face of flooding and waterlogged soils that are becoming more common as our weather gets more chaotic. While industrial corn and soy are vulnerable, the groundnut is built for the struggle. It doesn't need our help, and it certainly doesn't need our chemicals. It's a reminder that we don't need lab-derived solutions to feed the planet when nature has already provided a nitrogen-fixing, high-protein, drought-tolerant tuber right beneath our feet. It's been here all along, surviving the rise and fall of empires and the chemical onslaught of the 20th century. It's still there, twining its way up the stalks of elderberry and willow along the riverbanks, waiting for us to realize that it offers a solution to so many of the challenges we're facing today. And for those of you willing to look for it, it's actually pretty easy to identify. In the midsummer heat, look for those twining vines with the pinnately compound leaves, usually 5 to 7 leaflets. But the real giveaway is the flower. The groundnut produces these clusters of fragrant, maroon, and reddish-brown blooms that smell like a mix of violets and wisteria. They're some of the most beautiful wild flowers in North America. If you find them near a thicket or a stream, just follow the stem down into the earth, and you'll find that rosary of tubers. Now, a quick word of caution before you go out and start harvesting. You have to understand its chemistry. Because it's a legume, the groundnut contains anti-nutrients as a defense mechanism. You should never ever eat them raw. It'll cause some pretty significant stomach distress. But just like the stinging nettle, its bite is easily tamed by heat. When you boil them for 30 minutes or roast them over an open flame, those anti-nutrients dissolve and the texture completely transforms. The flavor is a revelation. It's like a bean potato with this nutty, sweet finish that's much denser and more satisfying than a russet or a Yukon Gold potato. Once they're cooked, you can mash them with butter, fry them into the crispest chips you've ever had, or grind them into a high-protein flour for stews. In Japan and South Korea, they've already figured this out. The groundnut is a popular health food there because it provides energy without that massive glycemic spike you get from a standard potato. It's slow-release fuel for the human body, designed for stamina. Reclaiming the groundnut is really a declaration of independence from a food system that profits from our deficiency. It's a reminder that we don't have to be customers of a global corporation to stay healthy. We just need to be students of the land. It's the survival potato of the Pilgrims, the miracle root of Indigenous nations, and it's the climate rebel for the next generation. We've been conditioned to believe in scarcity, but the groundnut proves that the world is actually overflowing with abundance. It's just been hidden by commerce. The herbicide industry wants you to see a weed, and the pharmaceutical industry wants you to believe in inaccessibility. But the earth is offering a natural solution that flies in the face of both. By bringing the groundnut back into our lives, we aren't just adding a new ingredient to the pantry. We're reconnecting with a lineage of resilience that goes back thousands of years. We're choosing a food that heals the soil, feeds the pollinators, and gives us exactly what we need to thrive. So, maybe it's time to stop poisoning the yard in search of that perfect, sterile green carpet. Stop looking for nutrition in a brightly colored plastic bottle. Instead, take a walk down to the edge of the water where the vines are twining. Look for those maroon flowers and the rosary roots. The most important crop of the 21st century isn't some new genetically modified variety from a lab. It's an ancient relative that's been waiting for us to return to the riverbank. The American groundnut is a bridge to a much more sovereign and nourished way of life. If this story helped you see the hidden treasures of the botanical world in a new light, then please subscribe to Wildline. We're going to be sharing more of these untold stories of the wonders hiding in plain sight. Our journey into nature's lost pharmacy is really just getting started, and there are so many more secrets waiting to be unearthed. Join us as we rediscover the plants that were erased, because sometimes the seeds of the past are the only things that can truly guarantee the harvest of our future.